Thanks, Zach and Michael. We'll have Zach back in just a little bit for another carrier update, but he's right. We've got Eric Kulisch on the line right now. He's our air cargo editor here at FreightWaves, and we talked to him a little bit about what happened with FedEx and the decision to cut off 1,400 of their customers really without warning. That happened last week. Let's hear about some of the fallout from that. Eric, thank you for joining us again this morning.
Thanks for having me, Kaylee. Yep.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on to talk through all of this. It's been about a week since FedEx gave their customers that announcement, really with little to no warning going into last weekend. Tell us about what we've learned in the last week about the fallout from that notice.
Well, we just posted a kind of a follow-up and an analysis looking at the fallout in the overall LTL market. And, I guess we've learned a little bit more about the types of customers that may be or seem to be affected. As you said, the FedEx, a lot of their terminals have been overwhelmed with cargo, as much of the LTL industry is, and so they tried to get a hold or restore some of their quality control and on-time service, and so decided to cut off these customer locations around the country, and it varied by location and geography based on where their service centers were most jammed up. So, but doing some other reporting, we noticed that apparently, some of the, most of these shippers seem to be smaller to mid-sized shippers, but digging a little deeper, it looks like, in some cases, some big box retailers, some larger companies are indirectly affected in that these suppliers ship to them and they can't get their stuff out. And some of these guys ship by terms that are called collect or collect on arrival. Where the big retailers got the transportation spending budget and has leverage with the carriers to negotiate better rates and dictate the route. So they just take control and tell the shipper, hey, use carrier X, carrier Y, we'll send the truck, you just load it and we'll pay collect. So apparently some of those stops have been cut off. And so in certain pockets, you could see some of these retailers affected. And then also interestingly, it looks like a lot of the shippers that had less friendly freight in the sense that, less friendly freight for FedEx in the sense that it was lighter, skids or pallets weighing with light boxes weighing 450 pounds or less. So that seems to be kind of a common characteristic of some of these shippers that were cut off.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for a big box retailer, like you said, to have control of it through collect, right? And then they'll go to the shipper, and you have to go to their website, right, as a shipper or vendor, and you can only use certain carriers, right? So I imagine that threw people for a loop too, because many of those people, they couldn't just go, oh shoot, we got to find somebody else, because if they do and it's not on that list or approved by that big box, now they're talking about fines and all that other kind of stuff, and you don't want to do that, especially if you're probably a non-contract, and then, like you said, have some of this not ugly but less desirable freight for FedEx, right? Trying to get it out there. That's not such a good thing. So we'll be watching that, I guess, pretty closely coming up. But Eric, what's going on in the air cargo and the security that's going on? We got some new things taking effect here in July.
Yeah. So doing double time there, doing some trucking news. So back to my main beat on air cargo. There's really big developments coming, and it's nothing new. It's been coming down the pike for the past year or longer. But new July 1st, new international air cargo security rules go into effect, and the U.S. has to comply. The Transportation Security Administration is putting out new guidelines for how to respond. Basically, what's happening is that for the past dozen years or almost, all the cargo that goes on a passenger plane in the belly has to be screened, inspected. Private sector either does X-ray or physical search or explosive trace detection or uses canines, and all that stuff gets screened. Now, new rules say any cargo that's going on, that's going on an all-cargo plane for export has to be screened. So that's a huge amount of cargo in the U.S. Maybe 60% of export cargo goes in wide-body freighters. So So that means a lot more stuff to screen, potentially more delays. How do you do that efficiently? A lot of the X-ray equipment doesn't fit the super big pallets yet. And so we reported earlier this year that, there's huge demand for these canine companies that can come in and sniff the sniffer dogs that can check for explosives because they do such a good job. But there's, takes a while to train these dogs and teams, and there's a shortage there building up capacity. Just the other day, last week, this week actually, the TSA came out with some alternative guidelines or an alternative approach for e-commerce fulfillment centers, large manufacturers, basically saying, hey, if you have, really good security on your premises, video cameras, fencing, all kinds of protocols, hey, we'll deem your facility equivalent to screening, and hey, you don't have to screen the stuff. Anything coming out of there with secure custody, chain of custody, we'll make it equivalent. And some of the forwarders aren't really happy with that because they're having to invest and do the screening, and they feel like, this is a double standard or making it easier for the Amazons and, Walmarts and others of the world.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with them complaining about that, because what you're describing is if you're an Amazon or somebody else and you have the sophisticated method that is proven to be as good or as stringent or better than what the screening is going to be, then you're good. If you don't have that, it needs to be screened. Sounds logical to me. I don't know what kind of argument they have.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of feels like the TSA is maybe like picking and choosing favorites with this, but at the same time, if you've got the money to do it, you might as well do it, right?
Yeah.
Eric, we talked a little bit. Sorry.
Can I just add one thing there real quick?
Yeah, please.
The only thing I would push back on or say is that, the forwarders would argue, hey, those security rules, if you have that security on your premises, that's a lot to cover for, shrinkage and theft and, kind of common garden variety type of security. And it's not the equivalent of securing or checking something for explosives that's going on a plane. There's all these different procedures. So, that would be the counter argument.
I got you. Yeah, and that does make sense. If it's not the same procedure, then it is a valid argument. I agree.
And the TSA saying you got to come through us, you're basically saying, hey, facility, you got to become register as a forwarder, go through the forwarder screening protocol. So they're trying to regulate it kind of a little more tightly.
Yeah.
Makes sense there.
Yep.
Eric, we talked a little bit to you last time about the changes that Air Canada was going through when it comes to being really bullish on their attempts to become a full freighter airline. Talk to us a little bit about the announcement of them converting some of their 767s, the idea of having, I believe it was an 8-plane fleet of 767s to deliver all freight by the end of the year. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As you know, the passenger airlines have pivoted quickly since the pandemic to use their passenger planes temporarily to carry a lot of cargo and help with the capacity crunch. And Air Canada was one of the first to, with a half dozen or so planes, strip out the seats and temporarily and fly with those boxes in the cabin. But, the whole year and the rise in their cargo revenue and the demand for shipping has led them to realize that, hey, we could leverage air cargo even more. We've got these older mid-size wide body Boeing 767s that we're retiring anyway because we're shrinking our fleet and they're less efficient. So they decided to transfer them to create kind of a separate all cargo division, convert these aircraft. They're going to convert about 8 aircraft and become kind of a combination airline, have a small all cargo fleet in addition to their passenger airline. And, most companies, when they get converted freighters, they go to leasing companies or buy them on the secondary market. But, Air Canada's got their own planes. And so they're pretty much sending them out through third party to get them converted. And the first one should be in service by October. And they just announced some of the routes that destinations they're going to be flying to South America and Mexico.
Yeah, they see this as a long-term opportunity. It's interesting, when we saw the capacity go away, Eric, we last year during everything, when everything started to change really quickly, it was interesting because we spoke quite a bit about how the capacity evolved with passengers moving and the belly capacity and that type of stuff, and how it was going to reinvent itself as we came back out of it. So it's really interesting to see what's going on.
And it's also interesting to see that they're not necessarily taking planes out of their fleet and shrinking their fleet overall. They're using those that were destined for retirement anyway. So it's kind of reduce, reuse, recycle, right?
There you go. Yeah, very green initiative. Very green initiative. Eric, what are you working on that's coming up next? Anything?
Got lots of things on my plate. Don't want to tip my hand too much.
Okay.
One interesting thing is, this is public news. Philadelphia Airport, they want to get big into the cargo sector. They realize they're underperforming or don't have a good cargo facility. So I'm going to try and write about their announcement of major investments and improvement there.
Yeah, interesting as well. Another outcome from what we saw going on is that type of stuff. Maybe Chicago or O'Hare will invest in some better infrastructure as well. So very cool.
We'll keep an eye on it. Make sure that you're keeping an eye out for Eric's stuff on FreightWaves.com.